My oldest daughter saves lives. My youngest cleans houses. My father said it with a smile, crystal glasses raised. 17 guests. Perfect linen, the kind of Thanksgiving dinner designed to be photographed. And then he laughed. Some people joined him. Some didn't. My 8-year-old daughter, Ava, was sitting beside me. She squeezed my wrist under the table. Mom, is cleaning houses embarrassing? That question did something to me. Not anger, not humiliation, clarity. But before I tell you what I said next, words that ended my father's reputation in one evening, you need to understand the 6 years that led to that moment. Because the man he was trying hardest to impress that night, he already knew exactly who I was, and my father had no idea. 6 years earlier, I drove back to my hometown of Fairhaven with 2 suitcases and a toddler. Asleep in the back seat, my husband had left in 48 hours. Tuesday, gone. Wednesday, emptied our joint account. Thursday, filed for divorce using his mother's address. By Friday, I was standing on my parents' porch. My father opened the door and looked at the luggage first. Not me. There's a guest house behind the property, he said. This is temporary. No hug. No, are you okay? Just terms. The guest house was barely 350 square feet. A cracked tile shower. One window that wouldn't close all the way. But it sat on my parents' land, which meant I lived there at my father's discretion. Within a week, I was cleaning homes for $18 an hour. Wealthy vacation properties owned by people who visited twice a year. I scrubbed granite, countertops, and polished stainless steel. Appliances while imagining what stability felt like. Meanwhile, my older sister, Dr. Vanessa Haley, had just completed her surgical fellowship. My parents hosted a dinner in her honor. I arrived late because I was finishing a job. My father announced to the table, "Sorry, Claire had to finish scrubbing someone else's toilet." Laughter. That was the first time. It became a tradition. Every holiday introduction went like this. "This is my daughter, Dr. Vanessa Haley." Pause. "And this is Claire." No accomplishments. No context. Just Claire. What no one knew was that cleaning those houses taught me something. Most of them were secondary homes, managed poorly, maintenance neglected, vendors unreliable, owners complained constantly. So I did what desperate women do. I paid $150 to register an LLC. I built a website at midnight while Ava slept. I called it Harbor Ridge Estate Management. It sounded bigger than it was. At first, it was just me and a borrowed SUV. But within a year, I had 5 properties under contract. By year 3, I had 12. By year 5, we were managing multi-million-dollar coastal homes. And one of my largest clients was a developer expanding into Fairhaven. His name was Daniel Mercer. Remember that name? Because the man sitting at my father's table that Thanksgiving was Daniel Mercer? Remember that name? Because the man sitting at my father's table that Thanksgiving was Daniel Mercer? And my father had invited him over to finalize a land sale. The land with the vacant guest house. The guest house Ava and I still lived in. He didn't know that. Daniel didn't know either. Not yet. And I didn't correct either of them. I waited. Because sometimes the truth lands harder when you let people build the lie themselves. Thanksgiving dinner wasn't even halfway over, and the man at the head of the table had already lost everything. He just didn't know it yet. Dessert hadn't even been served when my father made his move. "Claire," he said, sliding a cream-colored folder across the table, "we'll need you to sign this by Monday." I didn't touch it. The room went quiet in that polite, expensive way wealthy people go quiet. Dr. Vanessa Hale still glowing from praise about her latest surgical breakthrough glanced at me like I'd spilled something on the carpet. "What is it?" I asked calmly. "Just paperwork," my father replied. "The property transfer. The guest house needs to be vacant before closing." Vacant? Such a clinical word for you and your child need to leave. Daniel Mercer. Yes, that Daniel Mercer. The coastal developer expanding across 3 counties watched carefully. He didn't speak. Not yet. "When is closing?" I asked. 30 days, my father said. I'm sure you'll manage. Manage. I had managed everything alone for 6 years, but I let him continue. It's a generous offer, he added. Daniel's firm is offering above market value. We'd be foolish to decline. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was measured. We're planning a private waterfront expansion. Boutique residences. Limited build. His eyes flicked toward me. Recognition almost surfaced. Almost. You said the property was unused, Daniel added casually. It is, my father replied. Just a small detached structure. Nothing significant. Nothing significant. Ava had taken her first steps on that cracked tile floor. I built my entire business from a folding desk under that leaking window. Nothing significant. I finally opened the folder. Legal language. Transfer clauses. Eviction timeline. My name listed as temporary occupant. Temporary. 6 years temporary. I looked up. What happens if I don't sign? My father smiled like I'd asked a child's question. You don't own anything, Claire. Silence. But Daniel's expression changed. Subtle. Calculating. Mr. Halley, Daniel said slowly, you mentioned full vacancy. It will be, my father answered confidently. Daniel turned to me. You live on the property? For now, I said evenly. My father interrupted. She'll relocate. It's not complicated. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly. And what do you do, Claire? He asked. My father laughed lightly. She cleans houses. The room shifted. Because Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he said something that made my father's confidence fracture for the first time that evening. Harbor Ridge Estate Management. It wasn't a question. It was recognition. I held his gaze. Yes. My father frowned. You know that company? Daniel nodded once. They manage 9 of our interim holdings. My father's smile vanished. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back inside the folder. I'll review this, I said calmly. With my attorney. You don't have an attorney, my father snapped before he could stop himself. Daniel's eyes moved slowly from him to me. Actually, Daniel said evenly, she does. And that's when the room realized something had shifted. The dynamic had tilted. The woman they introduced as Jess Claire was not who they thought she was. But the real fracture hadn't even begun yet. Because what my father didn't know was that he had already signed something far more expensive. And the closing date wasn't just about land, it was about leverage. And leverage is everything debt. The silence at the table wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was strategic. Daniel Mercer folded his hands calmly on the tablecloth. My father tried to recover his composure, but I could see it, the tightness in his jaw, the recalculation happening behind his eyes. What exactly are you implying? My father asked Daniel. Daniel didn't look at him. He looked at me. Claire, he said, voice steady. How long have we been under contract? 3 years, I replied. Vanessa blinked. Under contract for what? Daniel answered her. Exclusive estate management for all. Mercer Coastal interim properties in Fairhaven and neighboring counties. My father's posture shifted slightly. That's irrelevant, he said quickly. This is a land sale. Daniel tilted his head just slightly. Actually, it's not. He turned toward my father fully now. When we entered Fairhaven, we acquired properties rapidly. Renovations, transitional occupancy, high liability assets. We needed stability. He paused. Your daughter provided it. The words landed heavier than any insult ever had. She cleans, my father insisted weakly. She operates a regional estate management firm, Daniel corrected, with a 98% retention rate and 0 liability incidents in 3 fiscal years. Now the room was completely silent. Even the forks had stopped moving, Daniel continued, almost conversational. The reason I agreed to view your waterfront parcel was because Harbor Ridge recommended it in Clash. My father froze. That's not possible, he said. I finally spoke again. It is. Daniel slid his phone across the table and opened a document. My company letterhead. A formal site evaluation report, commissioned 6 weeks earlier. Signed, Claire Bennett, Managing Director. Vanessa whispered, Managing Director? My father's face had gone pale. You recommended the sale? He asked me. I recommended development feasibility, I corrected. Conditional on occupancies. Stability and structural preservation. Of existing dwellings. Daniel nodded once. The guest house, he added. The air shifted again. My father swallowed. That structure isn't relevant to the valuation. It is to risk mitigation, Daniel replied calmly. We do not purchase occupied properties with unresolved tenancy. I told you, my father snapped at me. You're temporary. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Temporary tenants don't build. Registered businesses from the address. Listed on corporate filings. My father turned slowly toward me. You used this address? For 6 years, I said evenly. With your written permission when I applied for my business license. His silence confirmed he remembered signing it. He just hadn't read it. Daniel leaned back slightly. There's another complication, he added. My father looked exhausted now. What complication? Daniel clasped his hands. Harbor Ridge holds operational control agreements on 9 adjacent Mercer-owned parcels. Understanding dawned slowly. The land my father wanted to sell sat between multiple properties Daniel's company already owned. Without my operational cooperation, development stalled, permits delayed, vendor networks withdrawn, maintenance access restricted. Not illegally, contractually. Daniel spoke carefully now. We prefer seamless transition. If Harbor Ridge is displaced, we reevaluate expansion. Vanessa looked between us. Are you saying you won't buy the land? Daniel's gaze remained steady. I'm saying we do not undermine our most reliable regional partner. Partner. Not cleaner. Partner. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You planned this? He asked quietly. No, I replied honestly. I prepared. There's a difference. A long one. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, he realized something undeniable. He had underestimated the wrong daughter. But the worst part wasn't the land. It wasn't the deal. It wasn't even the money. It was what I said next. Because this wasn't about leverage anymore. It was about dignity. And I was done negotiating mine. No one touched their food anymore. Even the candles between us seemed smaller. My father looked at me the way men look at contracts they suddenly realized they should have read twice. What do you want? He asked. Not, are you okay? Not, can we talk? Just terms. I held his gaze calmly. For 6 years, I said, you've introduced me as a punchline. Vanessa shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. You minimized my work? You minimized my survival. You minimized your granddaughter's home. That's dramatic, my father muttered. Daniel didn't interrupt. He observed. Tonight, I continued, you attempted to remove us without conversation. It's business, he snapped. No, I corrected. It's family. Silence. Then I placed my hands flat on the table. You want the land deal? Yes. You want the valuation Daniel's firm is offering? Yes. Then here's the condition. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The guest house remains structurally preserved in development plans. My father inhaled sharply. It's outdated. It's compliant, Daniel corrected. I continued. Second, I receive a formal equity consideration in the development minority stake. Vanessa stared at me. You're negotiating equity? Yes. My father laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You don't have leverage. Daniel spoke quietly. She does. The weight of that truth settled heavily. Third, I added, you publicly correct every introduction you've made about me in the last 6 years. My father blinked. What? You host a dinner. Same circle, same tone, and you introduce me accurately. That's absurd. No, I said calmly. It's accountability. Vanessa whispered, Claire. But I wasn't done. And finally, I looked directly at him now. Ava and I do not leave that property. The guest house is formally transferred into my name before closing. The room exploded. That structure is part of the parcel. My father shouted. Subdivision is possible, Daniel said evenly. My father turned to him. You're entertaining this? Daniel's voice remained level. I'm protecting my company's operational interests. Which meant he wasn't choosing sides. He was choosing stability, and I was stability. My father looked at me like I had betrayed him. You would sabotage this deal? I didn't hesitate. I would walk away and lose everything? I met his eyes steadily. I already survived losing everything. That hit harder than any raised voice, because he knew it was true. He remembered the suitcases, the toddler, the silence. Daniel stood slowly. We can pause discussions, he said. But expansion requires continuity. Harbor Ridge is continuity. He looked at my father one last time. I don't invest where leadership is unstable. Leadership. The word echoed. My father sat down slowly. The authority he had held at this table for decades had evaporated in 20 minutes. He looked at the papers in front of him, then at me. This is extortion. No, I said quietly. This is correction. The difference mattered, and he knew it. But what none of them understood yet was that my real decision had nothing to do with the land, because leverage gives you options. And I just realized something powerful. I didn't need his property. I didn't need his validation. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need his permission. The real choice was whether I wanted to stay. The room felt smaller, not physically, psychologically. My father stared at me like he was waiting for me to blink, to soften, to retreat into the version of myself he understood, the quiet daughter, the accommodating one, the temporary one. But I wasn't temporary anymore. Daniel remained standing, calm but observant. Mr. Haley, he said evenly, we can reconvene next week. No, my father replied quickly. Too quickly. We'll settle this tonight. Settle? Like this was a dispute over silverware. I looked around the table. Family friends, business associates, Vanessa's colleagues. For years, these were the witnesses to my humiliation. Tonight, they were witnesses to something else. My father cleared his throat. You're asking for equity in a development you didn't finance. I secured half your buyer's holdings operationally, I replied. You're asking for land transferred that legally belongs to me. You signed permission for commercial use 6 years ago, I reminded him. That establishes tenancy protections. His jaw tightened. You're threatening my deal. I shook my head slowly. I'm protecting my future. Vanessa finally spoke. Claire, this doesn't have to be war. It isn't, I said. It's boundaries. That word made my father flinch more than anything else had, because boundaries meant limits, and he had never experienced limits from me. Daniel checked his watch subtly. The decision is simple, he said. With Harbor Ridge, we proceed. Without it, we withdraw. There it was. Not dramatic, just factual. My father looked at me again. You would walk away from your childhood home? That question almost worked. Almost. But childhood homes are only sacred when they are safe. I would walk away from disrespect, I said quietly. Silence. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel closed the folder. Claire, he said, if you withdraw your services from Mercer Coastal tomorrow, our expansion pauses. It costs us, but we survive. He paused. But if you choose to expand independently, we fund. The room froze. Vanessa whispered, What does that mean? Daniel answered her. It means Harbor Ridge has outgrown subcontract status. My father's face drained of color. You're offering her capital? I'm offering partnership, Daniel corrected. And suddenly the equation changed. This was no longer about staying. It was about scaling. My father realized it at the same time I did. If I accepted, I wouldn't need the guest house. I wouldn't need the land transfer. I wouldn't need anything tied to him. Not financially. Not legally. Not socially. For the first time in my life, I had an exit that wasn't survival. It was ascension. My father's voice softened slightly. You'd abandon your family? I looked at Ava beside me. She was watching everything, learning, absorbing. No, I said gently. I'd be teaching my daughter something. He swallowed. What? That you never stay where you're diminished. The words settled heavily in the air. Daniel waited. The room waited. My father waited, and I realized something profound. The real power wasn't in forcing him to change. It was in deciding I didn't need him to. I stood slowly. I'll send my decision in writing, I said, and for the first time that night. My father looked afraid, because he understood something crucial. If I walked out without signing, the leverage stayed with me. And this time, I wasn't coming back as just Claire. 1 week later, my father hosted another dinner. Same house, same polished silver, same circle of investors, colleagues, and carefully curated friends. But this time, there was tension in the air, because everyone had heard something had happened at Thanksgiving. No one knew what. Yet, I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Ava held my hand. Daniel Mercer arrived separately. Strategic. My father stood at the head of the table again, but he didn't look as tall. Dinner began the same way it always did. Small talk. Wine poured. Subtle glances toward me. They were waiting. Was I? Finally, my father stood to make his customary toast. For decades, this was his stage. My friends, he began. His voice was steady, but thinner than usual. As many of you know, we are entering a new chapter with the waterfront development. Murmurs of approval. Then he paused and looked at me. This project would not be possible without a key strategic partner. A longer pause. My daughter. The room held its breath. Claire Bennett, founder and managing director of Harbor Ridge Estate Management. You could feel the shift. Not polite applause. Respectful silence first. Processing. Then clinking glasses. Vanessa didn't look at me. Daniel did. My father continued. Harbor Ridge will retain operational control of adjacent properties, and Claire will be joining the development as an equity partner. There it was. Public correction, public acknowledgement, exactly as I required, but I hadn't told anyone the rest. He cleared his throat again, and the guest house parcel has been subdivided and formally transferred. A few people looked confused. He finished carefully. To Claire, applause followed. But I didn't smile, because this wasn't victory. It was recalibration. After dinner, guests circled me differently. Questions about scaling, about growth, about expansion models. No one asked about cleaning houses, because now they understood. It was never about the cleaning. It was about competence. Later, as guests filtered out, my father approached me privately. You've made your point, he said. I didn't need to, I replied calmly. You needed to see it. He looked older somehow. I underestimated you. Yes, I said. He hesitated. I thought you failed. I shook my head. I rebuilt. That difference mattered. Ava tugged my sleeve. Mom, she whispered, are we still embarrassing? I knelt down in front of her. No, I said softly. We're powerful. She smiled. That was the only approval I needed. As Daniel walked toward the exit, he stopped beside me. Ready for expansion? He asked. I glanced around the dining room one last time. The long table, the crystal, the legacy that once felt immovable. I've been ready for 6 years, I replied. And this time, I wasn't temporary. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, minimized, or introduced as less than you are, comment rebuilt below. Because rebuilding is louder than revenge. And if you believe in choosing dignity over approval, subscribe and stay with this channel. There are more stories coming about power, boundaries, and the quiet strength people never see coming. Sometime, the strongest move is simply refusing to stay small.